And obviously one of the reasons that EFN is running this series is because, you know, we're acknowledging that there's this increasing recognition of the intersection between, you know, health issues and environmental issues on a very broad level. So yeah, and thinking about that sort of land use element in a bit more detail. So Anna, you obviously focus on forests, and it'd be good to know from your side whether there are particular infectious disease risks associated with the destruction of forests in particular, and are the risks highest in specific geographic areas?
Absolutely. So I think what we know is that you know, that the higher concentrations of viruses are often found in the most biodiverse places on Earth. And which are those places? Many of them are the tropical rainforests around the equator, so places like the Amazon, the rainforests of Central Africa and Southeast Asia. And I guess we're very concerned about those places because of climate change, because they are the big natural carbon sinks, or some of the most important carbon sinks, and because they're very important for biodiversity in and of themselves, as well as local kind of climate effects that they have in terms of drinking water and local kind of rainfall. But what we're also finding, of course, is that we're worried about those places because of the potential for those places to be a source of viruses that could jump into the human population. So we know that when destruction of forests happens, then that brings people closer into contact with the wildlife in those forests. We know that, you know, animals like bats or monkeys might be kind of key species that hold those viruses and have the potential to then interact with humans and pass them on. We also know that in those places, livestock might be one of the reasons why the forest is being encroached upon. So in the Amazon, for example, 80% of the deforestation that we're seeing in the Amazon is for cattle ranching. So we're seeing the forest taken down in order to graze cattle to produce beef. In other forests, it's also primarily to grow soya for animal feed, which is coming over to Europe and other places for meat production. And so in terms of the livestock element, you know, viruses could also jump to livestock and then to humans. But another angle that I guess isn't necessarily as talked about is also the factory farming system itself being a place that can actually harbour bacteria, harbour viruses, and again could be another source of a future pandemic if we don't, as we're pushing for, shift away from this huge industrial meat system, which has pushed us into a meat-heavy diet. And perhaps we can go into that more. But yeah, I think in terms of answering your question, the tropical forests are a huge area of concern, but also the drivers, the meat industry is also an area of concern, and that's why we have a double approach at Greenpeace on protection of forests and trying to shift to a more plant-based diet. But I guess in terms of the kinds of work that we're doing, which hopefully has the you know, the benefit for human health that we're all talking about, differently to James, I guess we're focused more on the kind of legal food system side, or which actually still involves a lot of illegality when you look at illegal deforestation for cattle or for soya production. And as I say, we've got this twin strategy around building the case for forest protection, standing with Indigenous communities in particular in places like the Amazon, who are the best guardians of the forest, and have much of the legal framework potentially already in place, although that's under attack right now in Brazil, to have lands recognised, which then has the multiple benefit for biodiversity and climate. And then on the other side, looking at these big global supply chains, looking at the companies that are involved in the deforestation, who are ultimately then supplying to places like Europe and the UK when it comes to animal feed. And also in terms of the financial flows, so we're running quite a big piece of work at the moment around JBS, which is the biggest meat company in the world, riddled with corruption, a very, very corrupt company which is involved in illegal deforestation. And many of its subsidiaries are based in the UK, so we're seeing money being funneled, I guess, through the mainstream food system into companies like JBS, which are then destroying the Amazon. So yeah, our work spans lots of different things, as James is describing, looking at, you know, what are the policy mechanisms you can use to impact on supply chains, and also further forest protection, we run a lot of corporate campaigns at the moment focused on the retail sector in the UK, with a focus on Tesco's, asking them to withdraw their to not be doing business essentially with forest destroyers, and to be looking to reduce meat sales over time, because we know that we are over consuming meat in this country and we need to play our role in reducing demand. So I think the big message for us is around, we need to be getting a handle on global consumption when it comes to land. But at the moment we're using too much land. We need to actually be reducing the amount of agricultural land that's in play and actually be able to restore these ecosystems if we're going to weather climate change. And so we need to be looking at what the industries that are driving deforestation are trying to do. We know that that it's predicted that global meat consumption, if we listen to the meat industry, is going to increase by potentially 76%. We can't increase the amount of land we're using. We have to actually reduce, and that's why we need to be moving to a more plant-based diet, which ultimately uses less land. So this really for us is a question of what are we using land for, what going forward, what kind of a food system do we need if we're going to get back into balance with the natural world and be able to protect forests for future generations.
Brilliant, thank you. And you know, it's making it so clear that you know, it's really a question of these big, large-scale systemic changes that are needed, and looking at the drivers behind all of these issues that we're talking about. So it's great to hear everything that Greenpeace UK is doing on that front with regard to your forest work. And you know, it's interesting to hear you talking about, you know, how you were doing some message testing around your campaigning, and that, you know, it was quite difficult to get people sort of interested in the sort of infectious diseases angle of your work when they're already trying to grapple with the, you know, the concept of climate change and the links with forests there.